We're back in the studio, you're listening to Radio Ben. It's 5:45 on a Friday night, and now it's time for the third part in our series of documentaries, Music History.
Alonso Monzaretti's first piece of work illustrated his anger at the poverty he'd witnessed during his formative years on the streets of Brazil. His unique phrasing, unusual looks, and dynamic stage presence brought him to the attention of record producer Barry Baccaramo, who was looking to expand his new label and exploit some of the raw talent he'd seen perform in the clubs and cafes of Germany. The music had a real effect on Barry, and he immediately travelled back to Los Angeles, where he shared this unique new sound with many of the leading figures in contemporary fashion.
The golden techniques weren't what they used to be now. So, back then we didn't even have microphones. A lot of the time we're using boxes and sometimes just even string. The cheroot had gone across the floor.
John's arm had been burnt, hadn't it?
And his head was on fire.
Yeah, that's right. His face was coming off, wasn't it?
Keith died,
he did, didn't he? He died. He died on the spot. That's right, mate. That was a day before I recorded "Feel My Fire."
Yeah. Alonso brought over the bongos. It was a really funkin' sound, and we were pretty disturbed by it in a lot of ways, because we'd not heard anything like that. The closest thing we had to the bongos in San Fran, certainly for sure, was hitting lamps or hitting a wall or maybe something like that. We never heard the sound before. Monzaretti, he's the bongos that you hear on that, which pretty much makes what, I suppose all the Americans call a hook.
Well, John wanted to kill him, didn't he? But he couldn't because he was dead. Equipment had been burned. It was his plan to burn him alive on the sofa so we could record it.
One of the things I remember was that back then, you didn't have anything like a fire extinguisher. They hadn't even been fucking made yet, had they?
Remember bloody, Nigel spitting on it?
We got hold of a lot of these parrots, these ones that can repeat sounds back, and we had them in a cage, and basically when they heard the bongo sound enough times, the parrots would repeat it, and we could actually train them to the stage where they would just repeat the sound exactly, and we could get them to do it on cue. So this was a technique that was used. It was basically an early recording technique, so the sound was transferred onto the parrots and then parroted back to an audience without the requirement of the bongo actually being there.
However, things were due to take a drastic turn in Monzaretti's life when the freewheeling decade of the 1970s reached its twilight years and eventually drew to a close. Cocaine and rapping flooded the streets of LA, leaving Monzaretti and many of his friends drowning in a sea of change.
A new drug has just come in with a new decade. Cocaine has been flooding the streets. With it, a wave of crime that's been sweeping LA like a huge broom.
Yes, Bill, is this a safe place for us to live? Can we bring our
sex?
children?
If you look behind me, you can see all three of these things.
I saw him come out, and as you can see just beside me, you can just
several
catch
people
a
were
sight
shot in the head. One person was shot in the back.
There was brains and skull, and
if it was drugs, man.
Monzaretti, in fear of his life, committed suicide and then moved back to London, hoping to find sanctuary in the familiar surroundings of Britain. However, Thatcher's Britain was shite. So he committed suicide again, before returning to Mushroom Studios to record his final album. But he couldn't, because he was dead. Good night.
Well, that was the third part of our documentary music history that's been brought to you for the last 3 months on Radio Ben. Time now is 8:45, and now we're going to be going live to John in the studio for tonight's weather report.